This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm going to hit active cameras. Hello, this is live EPT. I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, and I'm going to be doing a session of EPT with Bella. She is in Orlando. And instead of talking about what we're going to tackle, she's going through some, lots of things we could sit and talk about. That's what traditional therapy does. But instead, we're going to look for where her body and her mind says where the stuck point is. So that's how we're going to start this. The other thing I wanted to say was I wanted to talk just briefly about EPT is a completely different approach in emotional health care. It, instead of using drugs and traditional talk therapy, EPT looks for identifying and resolving the unresolved issues in your life or the unresolved conflicts, the things that your brain is still brewing on but never really gets over. And we resolve it by using forgiveness. So the difference in a remote EPT session and a in-person EPT session is really about 20%. So 20% when you do it online is different. In person, we always use magnets. When we're online, if I have a remote client, I actually will use, eventually, if I didn't start using magnets, I will use magnets remotely. I'll get them to buy some magnets so they can use it on that side if I'm just doing remote. But I will do, sessions, a few sessions without the magnets because you still can get benefit. The other thing, when we're in person, I actually muscle test your arm, where I use muscle testing and I push on your arm. But when we're not in person, I have to use my own finger to muscle test. So I'm still muscle testing. I just can't reach through the screen and get your arm. So those are some of the differences. EPT is a 4-step process. So we focus on a problem, then we find a statement that has an emotion and a time frame that represents best the unresolved conflict that exists in the person's life that needs forgiveness. Then once we find that statement, we use magnets, or because you don't have magnets, I'll have you use your hands on parts of your body and you'll breathe while thinking about the unresolved conflict. And what that does is it changes the way the body reacts to the memory. And then we do forgiveness, because forgiveness kind of resolves the problem at a soul level and an emotional level and a physical level and a mental level, where the brain, once the brain lets go of this battle to try to figure something out it can't figure out or change, everything relaxes. And then the ability to create something brand new opens up. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. So the focus we're going to start with, because I know that Bella is in some family and relationship crises in her life that we could talk all day about, and I don't want to talk about it. It's all inside of her, and I'd rather spend this time doing EPT. So where I've decided to start is by asking her body what stage of healing she's in with this relationship with her husband, because we're going to start there. I mean, she's got kids too, and there's all of that. But the big hot point is this relationship with your guy, right?
Yeah.
That's it's almost like if he could just snap and be different, maybe my life would be better. Or if
Yep.
we could just stop doing this, maybe my life would be better. It's like your brain is it's like looking at him and deciding something beyond my control has to happen, and then my life will get better, which is crazy because that leaves you in misery. So the stage of healing you're in this relationship, are you two married?
Yeah.
Okay. And have you been married for 5 years?
No, we just got married last December,
Oh my.
but
Have you been married?
we've lived together the whole 5 years.
So have you been married before? Or is this your first
Yes.
marriage?
Yeah, no, I've been married before. We've both been
So
married before.
married and divorced, obviously.
Yes. Yes.
Woo! All right. So you know that rope. It's not the first divorce.
No.
Okay. So the stage of healing that your relationship with your husband is stage 4. So stage 4, and I use a lot of charts, and so I show people because they think I'm just kind of pulling stuff out of thin air, but there's 7 stages to healing, and it can tell you where you're at. So stage 1 is denial. There's nothing wrong with this relationship. Everybody hates each other in a marriage. Number 2 is anger. Okay, I hate this. It is miserable. I want out of this marriage so bad. Nobody suffers like I do in the marriage. And then the third thing is bargain. Okay, fine. I will do a free session of EPT online if that will help. I will go to counselors. I will go to a holistic healer. I'll get Reiki done. I will take medications. I will do whatever to make this better. That's bargain. And then at the end of the day, I'm still miserable. And then I'm hitting the wall. And that is stage 4. That's where you're at. You're hitting the wall. You've exhausted everything that could be fixed, as far as you know. And you're just miserable. And you think the only peace I'm going to get is to just leave. I mean, I just got to get out of here because it's too painful. So I'm going to tell you something. I'm not telling you that you need to leave or you need to go, because you're going to have to figure that out. What I'm telling you is, if you go while you're in stage 4 of depression, you will find somebody just like this on the other side. You won't open up to something brand new. You'll be stuck because you're leaving in a stuck place. So I'm going to help you with that, so that what you need to do doesn't have to be a repeat of where you're at. So let's see. So this is stage 4. So next I ask how many issues to move you from stage 4, which is that stuck place. Nothing is moving. It's just painful. No matter what we do, we get in a fight or we're not happy with each other. And I don't know how to fix it. So this is how many issues? 1. Look at this. Bella, only 1 issue comes up. That's crazy.
That's
Okay.
impossible.
You know, I know. But I think too. I'm usually looking for 2 or 3 issues. All right. 1 issue is what we're going to do. So how many issues? 1. So I'm going to tell your body, think about the first issue. Yeah. Love, family, current, self. Yeah. So this is think about yourself. And then I'm going over body points so that I know what emotion it'll be. So if you see me kind of doing this, that's what I'm doing as I muscle test. So think about yourself, and it's grief. My grief. So it's my grief. That's the first emotion, maybe the only one, but right now we know it's the first one. So it's my grief, and it's my grief in this relationship. Do you know why you feel grief in the relationship? I mean, is it because he's mean to me? It could be because he loves me.
Um, what I feel that is the issue, I don't know if that's the grief, but what I feel is that he can't really love me the way that I need to be loved, or like I
I
don't
get
feel it.
Okay, so my grief because he can't. When I ask he can't, that one's not it. My grief because he won't, no. So I'm going to that he won't love, he can't love me. My grief because, how about, because I can't feel it. I can't
Maybe.
feel it. It doesn't feel, yeah, I don't, I don't believe he loves me. But if I ask your body if you believe he can, it's a yes. You believe he can, and you even believe he does. You just don't feel it. It's like you're just not feeling it. Um, and that may be grief because I don't feel what he has to give, and that makes me miserable and it makes him miserable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you said a lot when you said my grief because I don't feel the love he has to give.
Right.
Is
Well,
that
I like it is, and it's just because I don't like, yeah, I really don't feel it. You're right. But like I feel like it's because he doesn't show it. Like, why
all
would you
right?
be with
So,
me if you're not?
so my grief because I don't feel his love, but I also feel like it's his fault that I don't feel it, right?
Possibly.
You don't know, you're not sure. Yeah.
Right.
So my grief because he doesn't show it. Um, you know what? When I muscle test, what your body says uh, aligns with is my grief because he does show his love and I don't feel it. So it's like, and I, even if I ask, I don't feel it. If I ask, I can't feel it, that shows up. And I'm focusing on your, whether you feel it or not, because this is kind of a numb state for you. And that would be like a trauma. That's a trauma situation where somebody feels they're disconnected or they just don't feel something. They're numb and they don't know why. And it's very frustrating. And that usually goes to a, and we'll find an original place. But so this is my grief. But muscle testing, it says my grief is because he shows his love and I can't feel it. So he shows love and I'm going to put don't and can't in there. They both test. I don't and I can't. He shows love and I can't feel his love. Um, does the love he shows, does it hurt ever? Like what he tries to do that you think of, does that make you go, that's not enough, or I feel you didn't make me feel better, or I still don't feel it, you got to do more,
I
or that it's
I feel like what I sense is that he like withdraws and he uses love when he wants it. Like when he wants something in the relationship, then he is
all
loving.
right.
When he doesn't want anything from the relationship, he pulls away.
All right. I like that's legit. I'm going to write that down. Probably not the first person you've been with who did that.
No, they're all the same actually. They're all the same guy.
Well, hopefully we'll get you over that hump and you can start like attracting, or even, I don't know if James is this guy or if that's what your brain zeroes in on. I don't know. Um,
Right.
I don't know James well enough to say that. So he could be this guy and you may have fallen in love because you're still trying to fix this guy. Or maybe he's not this guy. And as soon as you get with someone, your brain just starts going to everything he does that looks like that guy. So that I can either, so I can kick him to the curb and feel triumphant, you know, like I fixed something that I never fixed in the past. So, I want to write this right. He uses love when he needs something out of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
When he needs something, then he uses love. Something out of the
And I mean,
relationship.
I do like have some expectations, I feel like that I
Yeah,
want it, like this physical connection and this like I love you, like with words and with actions all the time, like this, just this
a craving.
physical, like, yeah,
Like, yeah, so you yourself, you're like aware enough about yourself to say, um, I may be craving more attention than a healthy adult would actually need, but I
yeah, probably.
definitely need it. I need it. I notice I need it, and I'm not sure why. And maybe there's no man who could ever fulfill that. Or maybe I just think that because I have this feeling that isn't covered up with love, there's something wrong. I don't know. We'll uncover it. Okay, so this one issue, Bella, one. All right, so and it's grief. So it's a lot of, I want to say grief is a lot of pain and sadness. So my grief. All right, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna test here grief and grief. Okay, so I need you to put a hand over your lung, like that, over kind of your, yeah, and then a hand on your forehead, and then we're gonna just think about this grief from currently in this relationship that I feel in this really close relationship where he shows love, but I don't feel his love. It's not enough. I feel like I need more, but I can't feel it, and it's just really sad. And I feel like he's using love when he needs something out of the relationship. So I need you to breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out. Oh, that feels better. Okay. Any other? Oh, unique. You can take your hands down. Okay. I got no other emotions in this current. Now we're going to ask, is there an original time when something like this has happened in your life before? I want to know I want to know the earliest time. So the question, and we're going to ask your body, so you don't have to come up with it. Is it yes, conception of birth, birth to 5, age 5? So at age 5, a similar thing happened. So age 5, is it somebody else? It's my grief. So it's my grief at age 5 with a friend, family, original, with dad. My grief. Do you know what this is?
No idea.
Was your dad in your house?
Yeah.
My grief at 5 with dad. So what was he like? Was he like really lovey-dovey?
He
Did your
actually
mom and dad?
was. I mean,
So
I
did,
grew up thinking he was like my hero, even though later on I feel like he's very avoidant, like he's very emotionally absent, which makes sense that all my partners have been that same type of emotionally absent.
right, right.
Like,
So and it's phase 2. So phase 2 trauma, which means at age 5, you basically operate to protect yourself in a relationship by functionally disassociating your brain. So that's the person who acts like a robot. I go through the motions so that I don't feel this extreme need for attention, which I feel embarrassed by. And I don't feel this extreme grief because you may not be there for me, or because you don't show me love except when you need something. Um, so at age 5, did you have any kind of accidents or traumas? And you felt
not,
your dad he was hero. At age 5, he was a hero. Your
yeah, for
guy.
always, yeah.
And did he have any accidents, or did he go somewhere away for a while to the
Mm,
hospital?
honestly, I don't remember a lot about my childhood. So,
Okay.
I mean, I've been in
We're,
therapy forever and I'm still in therapy because of that. I don't
okay.
remember anything about my childhood.
All right. So here's part of the reason why, because you coped with whatever was happening that was you couldn't handle by functionally disassociating. You're the kid that they say earth to Bella, right? You just check out. So that was your coping mechanism in an environment that, and I don't want to say something terrible happened here because I don't know. I just know that it was bad. Whatever was going on, you disassociated from to manage.
Mm.
And that disassociate, and that's one reason I'm asking if it's possible that you actually had some kind of a trauma or an injury and your
I
dad
mean,
helped you,
I broke
like a
my arm, but I thought it was about 4. I'm not really
right.
even sure. Like the only
Yeah.
reason I know this is from pictures.
Oh, wow. So you don't even remember.
I don't remember.
So because you don't remember anything in regular therapy, are they assuming or presuming that you have had some type of physical, emotional, or sexual trauma as a child?
I did. I do have that in my history, but not until I thought was until about
So and
9 years old.
right.
So
And
I
was
don't
at
know.
9. So here's a question. So you don't remember breaking your arm, so you probably wouldn't have remembered any kind of
I mean, I
sexual
remember like
trauma.
I remember putting like my hand on the gate, and I remember the gate coming like and like
Yeah.
crushing my arm. But I like
Ah,
don't really remember like who came to get me, who came to save me, like that I don't remember.
do you remember if it was during the daytime when your mom would have had to save you instead of your dad?
I think it was during the daytime, yes.
So your dad would probably would have been at work.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask, yeah, is there
Yeah, I don't think my dad was there.
right. So this is so the grief with your dad, I'm thinking even though you're feeling like it's age 4, it's kind of a window we're looking at that trauma of getting your arm broken. Um it tests for this. So my guess is my grief is because my dad isn't here. Like my dad's not here. He could have saved me. He could
Hmm.
have protected me from this. So my grief, and that all tests. So he's not here for me when I need him. I need him and he's not here.
Right.
So this is when you're 5. He's not here and he could have protected me. Uh, well, and he could have, he could have made it better. All right. So I'm going to throw this in too. I muscle tested to see if you have any kind of sexual trauma here, and I got no
I
in the
have.
age 5.
Oh no, yeah, not an age 5. I don't think it was
Right.
then.
Well, and I'm thinking because you can't remember, I thought I'm going to muscle test just to see if something was going on that you just didn't know because you
But
would have
like
been really
I do know like when I do have the memories of the abuse that my parents weren't there, or like they were in another room in the same, we had a beach house, and they had no idea. Like they never came, they never looked for me. So that's kind of this part of the
it's
story,
similar.
I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because I mean when you're 5, if you are the reason I tested because when you're 5 and you're sexually molested or if that boundaries crossed, 5-year-olds are so innocent they don't even know if this was right or wrong.
Right.
It's just they know they don't feel right about it, but they don't know, they don't have any reference point.
Mhm.
um so was the person who happened when at age 9 was the person in your life when you were 5?
Yeah, because he's my uncle. He's my aunt's husband.
So it was an adult.
Yeah,
So he was in your life, but probably not, you weren't hanging, he didn't have access when you were 5.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And he may have thought 5-year-olds talk. A 5-year-old doesn't know. So they're like, hey, what's up with this? But a nine
True.
year old is like, oh no, I know this isn't supposed to happen. I don't want to upset my parents. It's a
Yeah.
different thing. But this is actually a trauma of getting your arm broken and crushed. And do you remember them setting it?
No, I just remember like the cast. I don't remember like the hospital or anything,
Wow.
which is weird, right? Yeah, I know.
That's very weird. Very weird. But
Girl, I've
it's
been in
like they,
therapy all my life since I was a child.
ah, well, and has anybody talked about that break?
No, no, never.
All right. Well, see, I am hoping that they have talked to death all the sexual abuse or whatever, the sexual
Right.
whatever happened,
Yeah.
that they have talked that to death. And in talking that to death, they kind of missed this piece here, is what I'm hoping. That maybe, I mean, because traumas to your body, sometimes it's just this horrible breaking of my arm and I'm a little kid and my hero is nowhere to be found. That's enough of a trauma.
Yeah.
And it's not even sexual, it's just traumatic
Right.
because as you don't, and everybody around you's freaking out and you coped at age 5 by just checking out and disassociating. And
Mm.
I'm going to tell you that in trauma, I call that trauma brain 2, phase 2, when both sides of your brain go offline and you miss time and you miss memories. It's the same sense when you drive from point A to point B and you can't remember if you passed a Starbucks, but you passed 3 of them.
Yeah.
It's, so you can function in phase 2 trauma, but you cannot create anything, which means
Mhm.
that, and it's very difficult to feel anything in phase 2 trauma because phase 2 trauma is designed to numb you to a situation so that you can get through it. So when you automatically cope by your brain going into phase 2 trauma, you stop feeling stuff. And you can only really respond to what's programmed inside of you. You can't create something more loving, even though you want to
Mm.
try. You really can't create something when you're offline, so to speak.
Right.
All right, so we're going to do my grief. Is there any other emotions? No. Oh my goodness. Okay, so phase 1, phase 2. So here's what you're going to do. If you were here, I would stick, and speaking of, I'm using a sound machine too. I like to interfere with the body a lot because all those memories are part of your body. So, to sit there and try to, for me, the failure of talk therapy is you have to really talk something to death. And really, people a lot of times just quit because they can't, they're like, I don't want to talk it to death anymore. And
Yeah.
they figure out what the therapist wants them to say, and then they just get out of there. But they
Yeah.
don't feel any different. They just go, well, I'll just live with my problem, you know. So if you were here, I would use the South Pole magnet, which is red with these little magnet covers, and because that would wake up both sides of your brain while we're doing statements. But what I want you to do is I want you to tap just
Mhm.
randomly. Basically, I want you to interfere with your brain thinking it's going to go through this session and check out while we're talking. So
Mhm.
as long as I'm like clobbering your head, so to speak, your brain has to pay attention, right? So I need you to say, so if you get really tired and you need to take a rest, that's okay. But in the meantime, I want you to stay in your body, and this is how we're doing it. So I need you to repeat after me. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I can't feel
that I can't feel
the pain of this trauma at age 5,
the pain of this trauma at age 5,
my arm getting crushed and broken
my arm getting crushed and broken
because my dad's not here
because my dad's not here.
and he could have made it better.
He could have made it better.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I have to stay disassociated
that I have to stay disassociated
and disconnected
and disconnected
from my feelings
from my feelings
and myself
and myself
because at age 5,
because at age 5,
I felt grief
I felt grief
when my arm got crushed.
when my arm got crushed.
It was terrifying.
It was terrifying.
But the worst part was the guy I depended on wasn't there.
But the worst part was that the guy I depended on wasn't there.
Yeah, it all happened and he wasn't there.
It all happened and he wasn't there.
And the person that I normally turn to for help was gone.
And the person that I normally turned to was gone.
And then breathe. I forgive my dad
I forgive my dad
for not being there
for not being there
when I crushed my arm and I was dying.
when I crushed my arm and I was dying.
And then breathe. I forgive my 5-year-old self
I forgive my 5-year-old self
for believing
for believing
that, yeah, that I can't show up in my life
that I can't show up in my life
without feeling grief
without feeling grief
because my dad's not here
because my dad's not here
when I broke my arm,
when I broke my arm,
when I needed him the most,
when I needed him the most,
and I was on my own.
and I was on my own.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I have to feel grief
that I have to feel grief
when I can't or I don't feel James's love.
when I can't or don't feel James's love.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I still need a man in my life
that I still need a man in my life
who doesn't show up,
who doesn't show up,
just like my dad wasn't there,
just like my dad wasn't there,
so that I can
so that I can
numb up
numb up
to all the pain of that trauma.
to all the pain of that trauma.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I need a man like my dad who doesn't show up when I need him.
that I need a man
A
like
man
my
like
dad
my dad who doesn't show
who
up
doesn't show up
when I need
when
him.
I need him.
Because I idolized my dad.
Yeah, because I idolize my dad.
He was my hero.
He was my hero,
But in this significant trauma, he didn't show up.
but in this significant trauma, he did not
Trauma. He
show.
didn't show up.
He
And
didn't
then
show
breathe.
up.
I'm going to jump up a little just because of what you said about age 9. I forgive my dad
I forgive my dad
for not showing, for not being there when I broke my arm,
for not being there when I broke my arm.
and not and I forgive myself for believing he wasn't there when I was being mistreated, when I was being abused. I forgive myself for believing he wasn't available when I was being abused
I
because he
forgive
wasn't
my
there when I broke my arm.
I
I
forgive my
forgive
dad.
I forgive myself
I forgive myself
for
for
believing
believing that my dad
that
wasn't
he wasn't available
he wasn't available
when I was being abused
when I was being abused
because he wasn't there when I broke my arm.
because he wasn't there when I broke my arm.
And then breathe. Yeah. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that when this sexual trauma occurred,
that when this sexual trauma occurred,
it was just like breaking my arm.
it was just like breaking my arm.
The person I relied on wasn't available,
The person that I relied on wasn't available,
even though he may have been.
even though he may have been.
I didn't know how to say anything about it.
I didn't know how to say anything about it.
Yeah, I just did it on my own.
I just did it on my own. Yeah.
And I felt all that grief
And I felt all that grief
of being stuck, getting hurt.
of
Yeah,
being stuck, getting hurt
on my own without my hero.
on my own without my hero.
And then breathe. Oh, that feels better. Yeah. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that that I can't have an adult, intimate sexual relationship.
that I can't have an adult, intimate sexual relationship
And yeah, without feeling all of this grief
without feeling all of this grief
because my arm broke when I was 5 and my dad wasn't there for me.
because my arm broke when I was 5 and my dad wasn't there for me.
And then he was there when I was 9, but I didn't feel I could go talk to him.
And then he was there when I was 9, but I didn't know how to go and ask him
Right.
for help.
I was frozen
I was frozen
from the trauma at age 5 of breaking my
from
arm
that trauma on age 5
and breaking my arm
and breaking my arm.
and then breathe. I forgive myself for believing at age 5 that my dad would never, ever be there for me.
I forgive myself on age
For
5
believing
for believing that on age 5 my dad wouldn't be there for me.
that, and it was, I had to feel sad for depending on him when he wasn't there.
I had to feel
And I,
sad for depending on him when he wasn't there.
and I forgive myself for giving up
I forgive myself for giving up
the dependency
the dependency
and love
and love
and trust
and trust
that I had with my dad before I broke my arm.
that I had with my dad before I broke my arm.
I forgive myself for giving all of that up
I forgive myself for giving all that up
because of a trauma that I could not avoid.
because of a trauma that I could not avoid.
And then breathe. I give my 5-year-old self permission to accept.
I give my 5-year-old self permission to
To
accept.
if your dad could have been there when you crushed your arm, he would have been.
If my dad could have been there when I was 5 and crushed my
And
arm,
crushed my
he would have been
He
there.
would have been there. He would have been there. And then breathe.
Yeah.
I give my 5-year-old self permission
I give my 5-year-old self permission
to let go
to let go
of all the I want to say all the love and connection
of all the giving up, all the
yeah, I'm going to
love
give
and
up all the
connection.
love and connection that uh, I was seeking when I broke my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Giving up all the love and connection that I was seeking when I broke my arm.
I give it all up
I give it all up
because I know the future.
because I know the future.
My arm healed up fine,
My arm healed up fine,
and my dad still loves me,
and my dad still loves me.
and he still was my he could still have been my hero.
He could still have been my hero.
And then breathe. Yeah. Without this pattern. Okay, now I want you to rub here, just under your collarbone, and I need you to say, without this pattern of grief and
Without
trauma,
this without this pattern of grief and trauma,
I say yes
I say yes
to the terror and trauma of crushing my arm
to the terror and trauma of crushing my arm
and turning and knowing my dad's not home.
and turning and knowing my dad's not home.
And I call it all up
And I call it all up
and I release it
and I release it
from my body, mind, and spirit.
from my body, mind, and spirit.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I can feel disappointment
I can feel disappointment
and failure in myself or my relationship
and failure in myself or my relationship
without feeling like a 5-year-old who never got what she needed from dad when she broke her arm. Without feeling like a 5-year-old
without feeling like a 5-year-old
who never got
who never got
what I needed when
what
I
I
broke
needed
my arm
when I broke my arm from my
because
dad
my dad wasn't there. Yeah.
because my dad wasn't there.
Yeah. Okay. So even though I believed I needed something from my dad when I broke my arm,
Even though I believed I needed
I
something
needed
from my I needed something from my dad when I broke my arm,
something more.
something more.
I was wrong.
I was wrong.
Everything I needed was there for me.
Everything I needed was there for me.
All the love, all the healing,
All the love, all the healing,
all the compassion,
all the compassion,
all the medical care.
all the medical care.
It was all there for me.
It was all there for me.
And if my dad could have been there, he would have.
And if my dad could have been there, he would have.
It was an emergency, and so he couldn't make it.
It was an emergency, and so he couldn't make it.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I am free
I am free
to open my heart,
to open my heart,
to feel and receive
to feel and receive
all the love
all the
my,
love
my dad had for me.
my dad had for me.
And it's enough.
And it's enough.
It's always been enough.
It's always been enough.
He gave everything he could give.
He gave everything he could give.
And even if I
And,
am falling apart in my relationship,
and even if I'm falling apart in my relationship,
and even if I'm depressed and feeling bad,
and even if I am depressed and feeling bad,
my dad can't give me any more.
my dad can't give me any more.
He's given everything he can give,
He's given everything he can give.
and it's enough.
And it's enough.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
even if I'm in a crisis
even
in
if I'm in a crisis,
in a sexual romantic relationship,
in a sexual and romantic relationship,
my dad can't give me any more than he's already given me.
my dad can't give me any more than he has already given me.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I don't need to create painful romantic relationships
I don't need to create painful romantic relationships
to remind me why
to remind me why
I shouldn't depend on the love of my dad.
I shouldn't depend on the love of my dad.
And then breathe. Oh, that felt good. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I can stop creating disharmony and pain
I can stop creating this harmony and pain
in my romantic relationships.
in my romantic relationships.
Yeah, because my 9-year-old self wants my dad to rescue me.
Because my 9-year-old wants my dad to rescue me.
Yeah, and then breathe. I forgive myself for not knowing how to tell my dad
I
what
forgive
I
myself for not
knowing
knowing
how
how to tell my dad what I needed
when I was 9.
when I was 9.
And this inappropriate abuse started happening.
And this inappropriate abuse started happening.
Yeah, I forgive myself for not knowing how to tell my dad what I needed.
I forgive myself for not knowing how to tell my dad what I needed.
And I forgive myself for feeling shame
And I forgive myself for feeling shame
because such a thing happened to me.
because such a thing happened to me.
Because I carried this thing in our family.
Because I carry this thing in our family.
And I say yes to the shame
I say yes to the shame
from this abuse
from this abuse
and the shame for wanting more from my dad.
and the shame from wanting more for my dad.
And I call it all up
And I call it all up
and I release it
and I release it
to God's love and mercy.
to love God's love and
God's
mercy.
love and mercy. And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I can, there's no value in my life to create relationships that are painful and have disharmony.
there's no
No
need to,
value
no value
for me,
for me to create relationships
relationships that are painful
that are painful
and have disharmony.
and have disharmony.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I am free
I am free
to remember
to remember
the love and connection
the love and connection
I enjoyed in my relationship with my dad.
I enjoyed in my relationship with my dad.
And I am free to have a relationship that is 1,000 times better than that
And I'm free to have a relationship that is 1,000 times better than that
with James
with James
or um, or someone different if that's what happens.
or with someone different if that's what happens.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
5 years into a relationship
5 years into a relationship
doesn't have to ring my busted arm bell
doesn't have to ring my busted arm bell
and cause me to scramble for my dad's love.
and cause me to scramble for my dad's love.
And then breathe. From a man who can't give that.
From a man who can't give that.
He can't give my father's love to me.
He can't give my father's love to me.
And then breathe. I give James permission to forgive me
I give James permission to forgive me
for blaming him
for blaming him
for the empty, lost feeling I
for the
hold
empty love, lost feeling that I hold,
I for my dad's for the love that was missing when I broke my arm,
for the love that I was missing when I broke my arm,
and all the meaning I gave that.
and all the meaning that I gave that.
That just doesn't serve my life anymore.
That just doesn't serve my life anymore.
And then breathe. Without this pattern
Without this pattern
of grief and shame and loss
of grief and shame and loss
and disassociation,
and disassociation,
I am worthy
I am worthy
of a relationship
of a relationship
that is 1,000 times better than what I knew up until age 5 with my dad.
that is 1,000 times better than what I knew at age
Up
5 with my
until
dad.
age 5.
Up
Yeah,
until I was 5 with my dad.
right. I can stop going back to age 5.
I can stop going back to age 5.
And I can create
And I can create
out of the love my dad gave me
out of the love my dad gave me
something so much better
something so much better
than I ever thought possible.
than I ever thought possible.
Not because I deserve it,
Not because I deserve it,
but because I'm loved.
but because I'm loved.
Isn't it great? Wow. I got one more. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I am free to create a relationship, a romantic relationship
I'm free to create a romantic relationship
that is 1,000 times better than anything I've ever known.
that is 1,000 times better than anything that I've ever known.
Um, yeah. Even though I have, even
Even
though
though
I've
I
created,
have,
even though I held a grudge against my dad for not being there,
even though I held a grudge for my dad for not being there,
and even though this abuse happened to me,
even though this abuse happened to me,
I am no longer held captive to bad relationships,
I'm no longer held captive to relationships,
bad relationships,
bad
un-
relationships,
unhealthy relationships that are painful.
unhealthy relationships that are painful.
I can
I can
love more.
love more.
I can express what I need in a more loving way.
I can express what I need in a more loving way.
I can be vulnerable uh, and yeah, and tell the truth.
I can be vulnerable and tell the truth.
And then breathe. I think like all your therapy has made you really good with those last statements. That's what they did. That's what they got you good at. Um, oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to ask what stage of healing. Yeah, I got you to stage 6. Oh my goodness. Things are still moving. I'm going to tell you that you will notice things, continued release of emotions. You might feel tired. You might feel thirsty, so drink a lot of water. Um, you might feel hungry, like kind of weird, like, oh, I'm really starving right now. And then the other thing that people will sometimes notice is they'll start to notice patterns in their life that fit what we did. Like all the dots start to connect. and they just kind of
Mhm.
have that awareness. How do you feel?
Good.
It
Not too
felt
much
really,
like,
I know why the 5 year mark is there. The 5 year is because that's around the time when you busted your arm. That's when you made that decision
right.
that there's nobody here for me. The
I
person
just
I
felt that
love.
it's, yeah, I felt that it's interesting that my whole life I felt that way. And like, I still feel that way. Like, I want my dad to be
Well,
there. He's not.
yeah. And so what we were doing energetically was we were just, we were letting go of all that love that didn't exist because he was at work.
Hmm.
Because your brain is seeking for something that never happened, and nobody's going to give it because you're not going to
Right.
go break your arm and redo it.
Right.
So that was kind of a thing that was caught in your head too. What I love the best about this session is that you get to feel like you get to realize that even though the best feeling you ever had with your dad is really tiny compared to what you could create in a full blown, mature, loving relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
I
you
don't
could
think I've
actually
ever,
that
I don't
you
think I've
could
ever
actually
had a
have a
relationship.
right, that you could actually have a part in the creating of that relationship, where when you were 5, it was just a relationship that you relied on. It happened for you.
Hmm.
Dad did everything. He was
Right.
like loving you. He was there for you until the arm broke. And then it was like, oh man, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So you kind of got frozen there instead of realizing, especially all the therapy you've had. I would I would be willing to bet you're an expert in relationships. You know robotically what to say, how to spot what you need to do, habits you got that.
Hmm.
It's being able to bring yourself down in your body is your challenge.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I can tell you, if you feel like you're in a robotic, like I'm just going through the motions, I want to cry, but I don't want to cry, so I'm going to check out.
Hmm.
Um, just tapping on your head and like makes your brain have to pay attention, and it's not as easy to stay floating outside.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things to do. Another thing is to just touch hit your body. The other thing to do is to maybe hit your broken arm. I mean,
Hmm.
I would actually do in further sessions, I would do EPT on like just tapping your broken arm, the trauma of the tissue, and
Hmm.
releasing any emotion there. Um, and it would be still, now it's the freedom to be able to actually create something greater in my love relationship so that I can really actually enjoy this relationship
Right.
more than I ever did with my dad. Your brain was so looking for whatever you had with your dad that was gold that it wouldn't allow something bigger. And then the reason something bigger isn't happening, your words about James, which may or may not be accurate or true, is um, I don't feel his love. He's not here for me. All of that. Oh, my computer's doing stuff. Let's see here. Um, so some of the words you were saying are the words that you had. He could have made it better. That was my dad. He could have been here. He could have made it better. He could have made the difference. So some of that you feel in your relationship with James. So some
Hmm.
of it's overlapping. And
Yeah.
and like I said, I think the 5 year mark, I mean, I really think I don't know if you two are meant for each other or not. I don't know. I haven't worked with you long enough, but I do know this. If you leave because or you just quit because of the age 5 trauma, you're not going to know what you
Hmm.
could have had. But I think you will notice that there's some difference in the energy between you. And I know that James is going to do a session next week.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, this is a little different than regular therapy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I've done EMDR as well.
Hmm.
I've
Yeah,
done
I've had.
everything.
I love it. Well, now you have done everything. I
Yeah.
I I have had people take my training who are EMDR specialists, and
Hmm.
I've asked why are you taking this? EMDR, isn't that the gold standard in psychology as far as energy psychology goes? And I have been told EPT is like college compared to EMDR, which is like kindergarten. And I was
Right.
like, I did not know
Wow.
that. And they wanted to learn, like, how are you going deeper so quickly without
Right.
all this eye movement business? Yeah, movement. Yeah. Anyway, I will send you. I'm guessing that Paige typed, and then she had to bolt out of here at 2:30.
Okay.
And thank you so much, Paige. My daughter is in Tampa,
Yeah.
and so if you wanted to do, she has people who will drive a few hours to see her, but what she'll
Uh-huh.
do is once she's worked with them with the magnets and personally, then
Uh-huh.
she'll say, I need to see you every third visit. You got to come in. Otherwise, we can do it remotely. So that's usually what she does
Okay.
to help with the driving. And then she has some people who just say, no, I'm driving. I don't like doing it remotely.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was very nice meeting you, and I wish you well.
And can we get through the email more information about more sessions or?
Yes, yes. Well, I will
Okay.
send you, yeah, I'll send you that. And we'll send
Okay.
an email about because Paige has open heart holistic therapy. She just happens to be in Tampa.
Right.
So it's nice. I'm in Indiana.
Right.
So anyway, I'm gonna hit this record button and